Growing up, I learned pretty early that family doesn't always mean fairness. I was the afterthought, the extra, the one expected to be self-sufficient while my older sister, Sophia, got everything handed to her on a silver platter. If I got straight A's, no big deal. If Sophia passed one online class which she later dropped out of, my parents threw her a full-blown celebration dinner. If I got a job at 16 and started saving money, good. That meant I could help Sophia out whenever she needed it. She, of course, never had to lift a finger. I told myself that it didn't matter, that I'd move out, build my own life, and things would change. And I did move out, got a stable job, built a life where I wasn't just a shadow. But even then, the favoritism never stopped. Whenever I visited, my mom guilt-tripped me. Why don't you call more? Why don't you spend time with us? But every time I did, I was just the extra guest in my own family. So, why in the world did I plan a family vacation? Good question. A part of me still hoped. Maybe if I did something nice, if I showed them I cared, they'd finally see me just once as more than a convenient afterthought. So, I booked a trip. Not just any trip, an all-expenses, paid getaway to a luxury mountain resort, complete with private hot springs and breathtaking views. I paid for the flights, the hotel, the meals, everything. It was my treat. And when I told my parents, "Oh honey, that's so generous of you," my mom cooed. Sophia really deserves a break. Not we deserve a break. Not you deserve a break. Sophia, I should have seen it coming, but I swallowed my frustration, forced a smile, and told myself to let it go. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would be different. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The moment we arrived at the mountain resort, I knew I had made a mistake. The air was crisp, the view breathtaking, and the entire place screamed relaxation. But instead of appreciating it, my parents were busy making sure Sophia got everything she wanted. At check-in, the receptionist, Daniel, handed me the reservation details. Before I could even say anything, my mom leaned over the counter, all smiles. "Can we make sure Sophia gets the best room?" she asked sweetly. "She's been under so much stress lately." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Daniel looked between us, unsure. "Oh well, all the rooms are luxurious, but if you'd like, we can give her the suite with the mountain view." Before I could speak, my dad clapped a hand on my shoulder. "That sounds perfect, doesn't it, Olivia?" I clenched my jaw. I paid for this trip, but I let it slide. Fine, let Sophia have the best room. I still had a perfectly good one, until I didn't. We walked up to the suite, and just as I was about to take my key, my mom turned to me with that sickly sweet voice she always used when she was about to say something completely unreasonable. "So honey," she started, "we were thinking, since Sophia needs space to unwind, maybe you could take the couch in the living area, just for a few nights." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. None came. I glanced at Sophia, who was already lounging on the suite's plush bed, scrolling on her phone like she owned the place. "Yeah, Liv, don't be selfish," she muttered without even looking up. Selfish? I was the selfish one. I inhaled deeply. No, my dad sighed like I was causing problems. "Come on, Olivia. It's just a couch. There are extra rooms available," I pointed out, barely keeping my voice steady. "We can just book another one." "Oh, don't be ridiculous," my mom huffed. "No need to waste money like that." Waste money. I paid for this entire trip, and then came the moment that pushed me over the edge. "Well," my mom said, as if it was the most logical thing in the world, "there's always the car." I laughed. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "You want me," I said slowly, "to sleep in the car? It's a rental," she chirped. "It's comfortable. It's not like it'll be that bad." My dad nodded. "It's just for a few nights, Olivia. Don't make a big deal out of it." Sophia smirked from the bed, stretching like a cat. "Yeah. Don't be dramatic." And just like that, something inside me snapped. I looked at my so-called family, at the people I had spent thousands to bring on this trip. They had no gratitude, no appreciation, just expectation. Fine. If they wanted space, I'd give it to them. All of it. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and nodded. "You're right," I said, voice eerily calm. "I'll handle it." Then I grabbed my bag and walked out. But I didn't go to the car. I went straight to the front desk to make a new reservation. The lobby was quiet this late at night, the warm glow of the chandeliers casting a soft light over the polished floors. Daniel, the receptionist from earlier, was still at the front desk, typing away on his computer. He looked up when I approached, flashing a polite smile. "Miss Olivia," he greeted. "Is everything all right?" I smiled back, though it felt different this time. Sharper, more deliberate. "Actually, I'd like to make a reservation." Daniel blinked. "Oh, for another room?" No, I said, sliding my credit card onto the counter. For the entire floor, silence. I watched as Daniel's eyes widened slightly, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The entire floor? All of it. I nodded. Every single room available. He hesitated, probably wondering if I was serious. That's quite an expensive request, Miss Olivia. I tapped my card against the desk. That won't be a problem. For a second, he studied me, and then, deciding that my money was as good as anyone else's, he gave a small nod and began typing. It took a few minutes confirming availability, processing the payment, making sure everything was in order, but finally, he slid a collection of key cards toward me. All set, he said. The entire floor is yours. I exhaled slowly, a sense of satisfaction settling into my chest. Perfect. With the key cards in hand, I made my way back to the suite, the same one I had paid for, the same one my family had just tried to throw me out of. Inside, my parents were getting comfortable, my mom already adjusting the pillows while my dad scrolled through his phone. Sophia was sprawled across the couch, her legs draped over the armrest, watching something on her tablet. They barely even looked up when I walked in. "Did you get settled in the car, honey?" my mom asked absently. I smiled, a real smile, one that probably should have set off alarm bells. But of course, they weren't paying enough attention. "Oh," I said, pulling out a key card and twirling it between my fingers. "Actually, turns out I won't have to." Sophia frowned. "What?" I tossed the key card onto the table between us. "I just booked the entire floor." Silence. For a moment, all I heard was the faint sound of the TV in the background, the hum of the air conditioning. Then, slowly, my mom let out a nervous little laugh. "Oh, sweetie, don't be silly." I pulled out the receipt from the front desk and placed it in front of them. They stared at it. My dad's mouth dropped open slightly. Sophia snatched the paper up, scanning the numbers, her face going pale. "Wait," my mom finally managed. "Why would you?" "Well," one interrupted, "since you guys wanted me to sleep somewhere else, I figured, hey, why not? Now I've got plenty of space." Sophia sat up abruptly, her voice sharp. "You wasted all that money just to prove a point?" I tilted my head. "Wasted? That's funny. I thought you didn't want to waste money on extra rooms. But don't worry, this isn't a waste at all." I leaned against the doorframe. "Because now, you don't have a room." The realization hit like a brick to the face. Sophia's eyes widened. "What?" I crossed my arms. "I booked all the rooms, Sophia. Every last one." My dad sat up straighter, his expression darkening. "Wait." My mom let out another laugh, but this one was tight, forced. "But we already have a room, dear. We're in it." "Yeah," I said, "and I paid for it, meaning it's mine." The moment of silence stretched between us, thick with disbelief. Then, "No." Sophia shook her head, glaring at me. "No way. You can't just kick us out." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, but I can." I gestured toward the hotel manager, who had stepped into the suite behind me, his expression polite but firm. "Hotel policy states that only the person who booked the room has the right to decide who stays in it. Isn't that right?" The manager, clearly wanting no part in this family drama, nodded. "That is correct, ma'am." My mom's fake pleasantness cracked, and she let out a sharp breath. "Oh, come on, Olivia. This isn't funny. Stop playing games." I smiled. "I'm not playing games. I'm just following your logic. You told me I needed to give up my space, so I did. Now it's your turn." Sophia clenched her fists. "This is bull." A knock at the door cut her off. The hotel manager stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate the suite. Since the reservation is no longer under your name, you'll need to find alternative accommodations." My mom gasped, clutching her chest like I had physically struck her. "You can't do this to us. We don't have anywhere else to stay." "Not my problem," I said smoothly. "You had plenty of space, but you wanted more. So I took it. If you're really desperate, you can always book another room." My dad's face was tight with controlled anger as he pulled out his phone. "Fine," he snapped. "We'll just get another room." He scrolled for a moment, then his face paled. His fingers moved faster, tapping at the screen. Sophia, now anxious, snatched the phone from his hands. "There's nothing left," she whispered. I feigned surprise. "Oh no, is the hotel fully booked?" Sophia whipped her head toward me, her expression blazing with rage. "You booked every room on this floor." I nodded. Correct. Sophia's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. My mom's breathing had turned shallow, her face caught between anger and horror. My dad looked at me like I was a complete stranger. I leaned back against the doorframe, stretching my arms. So, let's recap. You tried to throw me out of my own room. I, being the reasonable person I am, decided to accommodate your wishes and find my own space. You, however, refused to do the same. So now, I smiled, enjoying the moment. Now you're left with nothing. For the first time in my life, I saw real fear in my mother's eyes. And damn, it felt good. For the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. My parents and Sophia stood frozen, their expressions cycling between shock, anger, and disbelief. I could practically hear the gears turning in their heads, scrambling to find a way to twist this in their favor. Predictable. Sophia was the first to snap. "You're being ridiculous," she spat, stepping toward me like she actually thought she could intimidate me. "You've made your little point, Olivia. Now give us the room back." I raised an eyebrow. "Or what?" She blinked, thrown off by my calmness. "Or," she floundered, then scoffed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "God, grow up. This whole tantrum is embarrassing." I smiled, tilting my head. "Tantrum? Yes, Olivia, a tantrum. You wasted all that money just to kick us out. I prefer to think of it as an investment." Her nostrils flared. "You're acting like a spoiled brat." "What? You think this makes you some kind of badass? You're just proving how selfish you are." I chuckled. "That's funny, coming from the person who just tried to force me to sleep in a car." Sophia crossed her arms. "Well, we're family, and family shares." I leaned forward slightly, voice light but firm. "You only care about sharing when it benefits you, Sophia." Her jaw clenched. "You are unbelievable." "No," I corrected, straightening up. "I just finally learned from the best." Sophia turned to our mom, expecting her backup. My mother, who had been silent up until now, let out a slow breath, schooling her expression into one of forced patience. She always did this, played the calm, reasonable one, while guilt tripping me into submission. "Olivia, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft, maternal, calculated. "I understand you're upset, but let's not make this a bigger issue than it needs to be. We can just forget all of this and enjoy the vacation like a family. Like a family." I stared at her, letting her words sink in. "Let's forget this happened. Let's pretend you weren't just about to let me rot in a freezing rental car while your golden child got a luxury suite. I should have known. My mother always did this, rewrote reality to fit her narrative." I smiled. "No." Her mask slipped. "Just for a second. Olivia, be reasonable." "I am." I gestured toward the door. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to enjoy my vacation in peace." My dad, who had been eerily silent, finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled, the same voice he always used when he wanted me to shut up and obey. "This isn't funny anymore," he said. "You've had your little revenge moment, but we're still your family. You're not just going to leave us without a room." I met his gaze, my smile never wavering. "I'm sorry, but I don't see how that's my problem," Sophia scoffed. "Wow. And you call me selfish?" I shrugged. "I learned from the best." My mother pressed a hand to her forehead, like she was the victim in all of this. "So, what, Olivia? You're really just going to let your family sleep in the lobby?" I leaned against the doorframe, feigning thought. "Well, if the lobby doesn't work out, I hear the car is still available." Her eyes widened in pure horror. "You wouldn't," I smirked. "Wouldn't I?" Sophia let out a sharp laugh, disbelief all over her face. "Jesus, you're seriously doing this?" "Looks like it." Sophia turned to our dad, who was gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "Just book another room, Dad," she said through clenched teeth. He didn't respond. She frowned. "Dad?" Still nothing. Panic flickered across her face. She snatched the phone from his hands, quickly tapping through the hotel's booking site. Her expression twisted. "You've got to be kidding me." I watched as realization dawned on her. She turned, eyes blazing. "You booked every available room?" I nodded slowly. "Correct." Sophia's face turned red with fury. My dad exhaled sharply, looking away. My mother's hands trembled at her sides, her face a mix of disbelief and rage. "Unbelievable," she whispered. I crossed my arms. "Oh, trust me, I believe it." My dad took a deep breath, clearly trying to suppress his temper. "Fine," he said stiffly. "We'll sleep in the lobby." "Go for it," I said, completely unbothered. My mom scoffed. "You think they'll actually let us?" I smiled. I guess we'll find out. Sophia let out a frustrated noise and stormed toward me like she was going to snatch the key cards right out of my hands. But before she could get close, the hotel manager who had been standing quietly in the background stepped in. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back," he said firmly. Sophia glared at him. "Are you serious?" The manager's expression remained neutral. "Miss Olivia is the registered guest for these rooms. If you cannot remain civil, I will have to ask security to escort you off the property." My mom gasped, like the very idea was an act of treason. "You'd throw us out?" she asked, voice trembling, as if the manager had personally betrayed her. He offered a polite but firm smile. "Hotel policy, ma'am?" The color drained from her face. My dad, clearly done with the whole situation, turned to my mom and Sophia. "Come on." Sophia snapped toward him. "We are not sleeping in the lobby like homeless people." My dad clenched his jaw. "Then figure something out." I couldn't help it, I laughed. A short, genuine laugh, because this was just too good. Sophia whirled on me. "You're going to regret this." I gave her a lazy smile. "Doubt it." My dad turned to the manager, his face tight with barely contained anger. "Fine, we'll go." He grabbed my mom's arm, dragging her toward the door. Sophia lingered for a moment, seething, before storming after them, and just like that, they were gone. The suite was suddenly quiet, the air crisp with the aftermath of everything that had just happened. The hotel manager turned to me, offering a small nod of approval. "That," he said, "was impressive." I grinned. "Thanks." He handed me the key card to the master suite. "Enjoy your stay." Oh, I planned to. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself, and damn, it felt good. The door shut with a soft click, sealing off the chaos that had defined my entire evening. I stood there for a moment, staring at the heavy wooden door, listening to the muffled voices of my family disappearing down the hall. Then, silence. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being nagged. No backhanded comments. No guilt trips, no demands to shrink myself so Sophia could shine. Just peace. I took a slow breath and turned toward the suite, my suite. The room was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the vast mountain landscape. The distant lights from the small town below twinkled like scattered stars, and the warm glow of the fireplace flickered invitingly, casting soft shadows across the luxurious furniture. I dropped my bag by the couch and stretched, rolling my shoulders. My entire body still hummed with adrenaline, my pulse slightly elevated from the confrontation. But beneath it all, there was something deeper. Relief. I had finally done it. No more being the second choice. No more being the afterthought. No more sacrificing my comfort just to be tolerated. This time, I had taken control. I walked over to the room service menu and scanned the options. Growing up, extravagant meals were something I only ever saw from a distance. Whenever we went out to eat, my parents would tell me to be reasonable with my order, while Sophia got whatever she wanted. Not tonight. I picked up the phone and dialed the concierge. "Good evening, Miss Olivia," the receptionist answered smoothly. "How may we assist you?" "I'd like to place a room service order," I said, glancing down at the menu. "I'll have the filet mignon, the lobster bisque, the truffle mashed potatoes. Oh, and the chocolate souffle for dessert." "Excellent choices, ma'am. Would you like a bottle of wine to accompany your meal?" I smirked. "Absolutely." After confirming my order, I hung up and sank into the plush armchair near the window, gazing out at the peaceful, snow-capped mountains. My phone buzzed on the table. I already knew who it was before I even looked. "Mom, you've made your point. Now stop being childish and let us back in." I rolled my eyes. Childish? That was rich coming from the people who had just tried to shove me into a rental car while they lounged in a luxury suite I had paid for. Another buzz. "Dad, this is ridiculous. You're going to regret this when you calm down." I huffed a short laugh. Regret this? I had never felt more at peace. One more buzz. "Sophia, you're selfish." I smirked. Selfish? Coming from the woman who had tried to steal my room? Please. I tossed my phone onto the coffee table, letting their messages sit unread. Let them stew. Let them rage. Let them throw their little tantrums. I was done playing their game. When room service arrived, I took my time enjoying every bite of my ridiculously expensive meal. The steak melted in my mouth, the wine was smooth and rich, and the chocolate souffle, absolute heaven. This was what I deserved. When was the last time I had actually treated myself like I mattered? When was the last time I put myself first instead of bending over backward to please people who only saw me as an afterthought? Never. But that changed tonight. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I sighed, already knowing exactly who it was. I stood, stretched lazily, and made my way over, taking my time before unlocking it. Sure enough, there they were. My mom stood in the middle, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, looking as if she had just swallowed a lemon. My dad's expression was cold, calculating, his gaze sharp as he studied me. And Sophia, well, she just looked furious. "This has gone on long enough," Mom said, her voice sharp. "Let us in." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "No," Sophia scoffed. "Hope you had your fun. Now, be a good little sister and fix this." I smirked. "Oh, I had plenty of fun." My dad's jaw clenched. "Olivia," he said in that low, authoritative voice, the one that used to make me fall in line without question. "You're acting like a child." I arched a brow. "Funny, that's exactly what I was thinking when you tried to shove me into a car, while Sophia took a luxury suite." My mom inhaled sharply, her lips pressing together in a tight line. "You know, we didn't mean it like that." I tilted my head. "Really? Then what exactly did you mean?" Silence. Sophia rolled her eyes. "God, stop being so dramatic. We're family." I cut her off with a small, almost amused smile. "That's the funny thing about family, Sophia. When you treat someone like they don't matter for long enough, eventually, they start to believe you." For the first time all night, I saw something flicker across my mother's face. Something dangerously close to realization. She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for whatever half-hearted excuse she was about to make. Instead, I stepped back and shut the door in their faces. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, my heart beat steady, my hands relaxed. I felt lighter. For years, I had bent over backward for people who never considered me. I had given and given, hoping that one day they'd finally see me, appreciate me, choose me. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I chose myself. I turned away from the door and walked back into my suite, letting the warmth of the fireplace and the soft glow of the city below wrap around me. I poured myself another glass of wine, lifted it slightly in a toast to myself, and took a slow, satisfied sip. Best vacation ever. Story 2. Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these Elton John tickets for months. My mother's voice rang through the hospital room, sharp and indignant, completely oblivious to the fact that I was lying there in pain, clutching my phone with trembling hands. It was Christmas Eve, just after midnight. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, and the antiseptic smell of the Las Vegas Medical Center clung to the air. My 2-year-old twins, Liam and Sophie, were in the corner of the room, playing quietly with a set of toy cars a nurse had given them. The only adult who seemed to care about my well-being was Valerie, the nurse checking my vitals, who gave me a concerned look before adjusting the pain in my abdomen felt like someone was twisting a knife inside me. But somehow, my mother's words cut deeper. "My name is Rachel Evans. I'm 33 years old, a single mother, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the afterthought in my own family. My younger sister, Melissa, was the golden child, brilliant, talented, adored. Meanwhile, I could never do enough to warrant more than an occasional nod of acknowledgement from my parents. Even now, as I lay in a hospital bed waiting for emergency surgery, they were making it clear where I ranked in their priorities. 6 months ago, my husband, Daniel, died in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light, leaving me a widow with 2 toddlers to care for. The grief was suffocating. The loneliness was unbearable. And now, after weeks of fatigue and excruciating pain, doctors had discovered internal bleeding. They told me I needed surgery immediately. I didn't have many options. I had no in-laws to call. Daniel had been estranged from his parents long before we met. Most of my friends had their own families to worry about. I tried to be strong, but tonight I was scared. So I did something I rarely did. I asked my parents for help. I called them from my hospital bed, explaining the situation in the clearest, most concise way I could. I asked if they could come and watch the twins, just for a night. I told them how urgent it was. And what did I get in response? Sighs, complaints, excuses. Rachel, we deserve to enjoy our retirement, my father had said with exasperation. You've been such a burden lately. We're exhausted from dealing with your problems. Exhausted from my problems? For the past 3 years, I had been sending my parents $2,500 a month. They took early retirement, despite having no savings, and I had been covering their mortgage, groceries, even their occasional vacations. I had done it out of a sense of duty, out of love, because family was supposed to take care of each other. But when I needed them, I wasn't worth missing a concert for. Tears stung my eyes as I stared at their indifferent expressions through the video call. You're unbelievable, I whispered. My mother scoffed. Honestly, Rachel, you're being dramatic. It's just a minor procedure, right? I'm sure the hospital can find a nurse or something. A strangled laugh escaped me. A minor procedure? Do you even hear yourselves? But they were done with the conversation. Call us when you're out, my mother said breezily. And don't cancel the bank transfer, our mortgage is due next week. Then she hung up. I sat frozen, phone still clutched in my hand, my heart pounding. Valerie placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I have a friend, she said quietly. Olivia. She's a professional nanny, used to work with kids dealing with trauma. I can call her for you. A stranger, someone who had never met me, was offering more support than my own parents. I inhaled sharply, pushing down the grief and betrayal, threatening to consume me. Yes, I said, please call her. And just like that, something inside me shifted. For years, I had let my parents take from me my time, my energy, my money without question, because I believed that was what daughters were supposed to do. But now, I saw the truth. They had never cared about me. Not really. And I wasn't going to keep sacrificing myself for people who saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet. As Valerie left the room to make the call, I picked up my phone and typed 2 messages. The first was to my bank. Cancel all automatic transfers to my parents' account, effective immediately. The second was to my parents. I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Do not contact me again. I hit send and let out a shaky breath. I expected to feel guilt. Instead, I felt something entirely different. Freedom. The first thing I felt when I woke up after surgery was pain. The second was relief. I was alive. The room was dim, the soft beeping of machines filling the silence. My body felt heavy, weighed down by exhaustion and medication, but the sharp agony that had gripped me before was gone. I blinked a few times, adjusting to the dim light, and then I saw her, Olivia. She was sitting in a chair beside my bed, scrolling through her phone. The twins were asleep on a small pull-out couch. Liam curled up with his stuffed dinosaur, Sophie clutching a blanket. You're awake, Olivia said softly, setting her phone down. Yeah, I croaked. My throat was dry, my voice rough. She stood, pouring a cup of water and handing it to me. Take small sips. I did. The cool liquid soothed my throat, and for a moment, all I could do was breathe. How long was I out? About 12 hours, Olivia said. The doctor said everything went well, but you need to take it easy for a while. I nodded, absorbing the information. My body still felt weak, but the overwhelming fear I'd carried before the surgery had eased. I was going to be okay. Then I saw my phone blinking with notifications. 27 missed calls. I didn't even need to check. I already knew who they were from. Your parents called a lot, Olivia said, like she could read my mind. They even called the hospital a couple of times. But I told the nurses you weren't taking calls. I exhaled, setting the phone down without checking the messages. Let me guess they're not worried about me. They're freaking out about the money, Olivia hesitated. Pretty much. Of course. The reality of my decision was sinking in, but I didn't regret it. For years, I had been their safety net. The moment I cut them off, they panicked, not because they cared about me, but because they cared about what they had lost. Jessica called too, Olivia added. That made me pause. Jessica Melissa in my mind, but I was still getting used to her new name, my sister, the golden child. What did she say? She sounded confused. Said your parents told her you were having some minor procedure and that you were overreacting. She had no idea it was an emergency surgery. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course they lied to her. I pulled up my messages, scrolling past the flood of texts from my parents and opening Jessica's. Jessica, Mom and Dad are freaking out. What's going on? Jessica, they said you cut them off completely. Why? Jessica, Are you okay? She really didn't know. I took a deep breath and typed out a response. Me, I had emergency surgery. I asked Mom and Dad to watch the twins, and they refused because they had concert tickets. They called me a burden. I finally realized they only care about me when I'm giving them money, so I stopped. That's why they're freaking out. Her reply came fast. Jessica, wait, what? They told me you were being dramatic about some routine thing. I had no idea it was an emergency. I would have helped if I knew. I stared at the message, my emotions a tangled mess. Was she lying? Was she just trying to cover for them? Or was she really that blind to the way our parents operated? I hesitated before replying. Me, now you know. I left it at that. Over the next few days, I recovered slowly. Olivia stayed with the twins, making sure they were cared for while I rested. She wasn't just good with kids, she was incredible. Patient, kind, but firm when needed. Liam and Sophie adored her, and for the first time since Daniel died, I didn't feel like I was drowning. Then, 2 weeks after my surgery, there was a knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It was them. I sighed, bracing myself before opening it just enough to see their faces. My mother looked irritated, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father had his arms crossed, his usual expression of impatience etched into his features. What do you want? I asked flatly. Rachel, this is getting ridiculous, my mother huffed. You've ignored our calls for weeks. We need to talk about the money situation. There it was. Not how are you feeling, not can we see the kids, just the money. I clenched my jaw. There is no money situation. I told you I'm done. My father scoffed. You can't just cut us off like this. We have a mortgage, Rachel. We had to dip into our savings just to cover the last payment. We were counting on you. I blinked at him, genuinely stunned. They expected me to keep paying. They really truly believed I would change my mind. I let out a slow breath. You managed your finances just fine before I started helping you, I said. Maybe it's time you start doing that again. My mother's face twisted. That's unfair. We retired early because we knew we had your support. My stomach turned. You mean you quit working before you could afford to and assumed I'd bankroll you forever? That's not how we see it, my father snapped. It's exactly what you did, I shot back. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. My mother's expression softened, switching tactics. Rachel, sweetheart, let's not do this. We're family. You don't just abandon family. I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. You abandoned me. I was in the hospital, and you couldn't be bothered to miss a concert. Don't talk to me about family. For the first time, my father actually looked guilty. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but I was done. I think you should leave, I said, stepping back. Rachel, no, I cut her off. This conversation is over. I shut the door. I stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, waiting for the guilt to creep in. It never did. I had spent my whole life bending over backward for them, sacrificing my own well-being for people who would never do the same for me. Not anymore. They weren't my responsibility. My kids were. My own healing was. And for the first time in my life, I was choosing me. I half expected them to come back the next day, or the day after that, but they didn't. Instead, my parents did what they always did. When things didn't go their way, turned the situation into a performance. A week after they showed up at my door, I woke up to a flood of messages from extended family, my aunt, my cousins, even a few distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. The theme was the same, Rachel. Your parents are struggling. How could you do this to them? They've given you everything, and you just cut them off? Your mom said you abandoned them after all their sacrifices. Ah, so they were playing the poor, mistreated parents card. Predictable. I ignored most of the messages, but one caught my attention, Jessica. Jessica, did you see the email Dad sent to the whole family? I frowned and checked my inbox. There it was, a long, dramatic email from my father, detailing how their ungrateful daughter had turned her back on them after years of financial support they never even asked for. How they were now in danger of losing their home because I had selfishly cut them off without warning. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. What it didn't mention, that I had asked them for help during an emergency surgery, and they refused, that they had called me a burden, that they had been living well beyond their means, buying boats and timeshares, because they assumed I would bankroll them forever. Jessica must have read my mind because her next message came through fast. Jessica, I already called them out, told them the truth. Some of the family is on your side now. Others, not so much. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Me, I figured. They've been rewriting history my whole life. Not surprised they're doing it now. Jessica, I don't get it. Why lie when people are going to find out eventually? I exhaled slowly. Me, because they don't care about the truth. They care about looking like the victims. Jessica didn't respond right away, but I could tell she was thinking. I used to envy her. She had always been the favorite, the golden child, the one they doted on. But now, for the first time, I realized something. She wasn't lucky. She was just another pawn. 3 months later. By now, my parents' financial situation had caught up with them. Jessica told me they had to sell the boat first, then the timeshare. Then, after months of scrambling, they put the house on the market. The same house they had insisted I owed them help for. They moved into a modest condo across town. Smaller, older, a place they could actually afford. And somehow, despite all their complaints, all their theatrics, they survived. Meanwhile, my life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. Without that $2,500 drain on my income, I could finally breathe. I hired Olivia part-time to help with the twins. I started therapy, finally processing everything: Daniel's death, my parents' neglect, my years of self-sacrifice. I even put money aside for an emergency fund, something I hadn't been able to do in years. And then there was the biggest surprise of all my side business. It started small. After Daniel died, I had made a memorial website for him, something personal, a way to keep his memory alive. A few months later, someone in my widowed parents support group asked if I could make one for their spouse. Then another person asked, then another. Now, it was a full-fledged business. I was making more than I ever had with my graphic design job. And for the first time since Daniel's death, I felt something I thought I had lost forever: purpose. Then, one day, I got a letter, an actual handwritten letter from my mother. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Inside, the tone was different. I've had time to reflect on everything, she wrote. Watching you build a life without us has forced me to confront some painful truths. I always saw you as strong, as someone who didn't need me. But now I realize you did need me, and I failed you. She went on to admit things I never thought I'd hear from her. That she had resented my independence. That she had taken my support for granted. That she and my father had started therapy, trying to unlearn the entitlement they had carried for years. There was no request for money, no manipulation, just an apology. I showed the letter to Jessica. She read it, then sighed. I think they're finally getting it. Maybe, I said. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive. Maybe I never would be. But for the first time, I felt something else. Closure. 1 year later, my parents kept going to therapy. They downsized their life, learning how to live within their means. They never asked me for money again. And me? I bought a house, a small one, in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard where the twins could play. Jessica came over often. We were building something new, something real, outside of our parents' control. One day, my mother asked carefully, cautiously, if she and my father could meet the twins. I thought about it, considered everything, and then I set my boundary. We can start slow, I said, supervised visits only. And if you ever treat me or my kids like a burden again, this door closes for good. She nodded, eyes filled with something I'd never seen before: respect. Maybe they had changed, maybe they hadn't, but either way, I was free, and that was enough.